is an introduction to particle emitters in After Effects. When you open up After Effects, you're going to get this main menu. I like to just close it, and it's going to open up to the main After Effects interface. I'm in the default workspace. Remember to always save your work before you start in After Effects so that you know where you're putting it. I'm going to make a composition by clicking the New Composition button, and we'll call that Particles. I am going to go ahead and choose HDV to make this easier on our computer. And we don't need the duration of 30 seconds. That's way too long. Let's do 4 seconds. Remember to click 4.00. If you just click 4, you're going to have 4 frames. Go ahead and hit OK. And let's create a solid that we can put some particles on. Right-click down in your composition and say New Solid. It doesn't really matter what color you make it today. I'm going to leave mine with medium red. We should have a 4-second long composition with a 4-second long solid in it. Today we're going to learn how we can create something on this from nothing using particle emitters. Now this is just a very beginning intro to this. I'm going to go down to Simulation in Effects and Presets, and these are all of our main simulated particles. So the first that's easiest to understand is, say, Starburst. I'm going to pick that up and throw it on our solid. And you can see that it has created just a basic starburst. Now, because I kind of have a red, pink background, it's using that as my color. If you want to change the color of your solid, you can go to Layer, Solid Settings. Let me make this something that'll work better with these particles. Say a kind of, there you go. So that looks a lot better. And of course, there's a lot of choices we could change here. That's a basic starburst particle emitter. So that has been created just kind of from nothing using math. So I'm going to delete that just by clicking on starburst and hitting the delete key. Now I went ahead and changed my solid back to something dark for the next one because the next particle emitter we're going to look at is called Snowfall. And you can see, let me zoom in a little bit, it just makes some pretty snow. And the default is pretty good. Of course, you can go and change all of these yourself. I have zoomed in just scrolling my mouse. As you can see what Snowfall does. I'm going to get rid of that. Just click on the word Snowfall, delete. We also have Rainfall, and you can see how it's a little bit different. And we can change the size of the drops, change how much depth there is. Does it go back farther? I can definitely see a difference with that. So that was scene depth. The speed of it coming down, you can actually add some wind. So let's say wind is kind of pushing it a little bit. Rain is a pretty good particle emitter. And that is just a preset. But we can make all of these ourselves. So we're going to go and show you kind of how to do that. There's a couple of more. Bubbles. Mr. Mercury is kind of cool. Okay, but all of these have been made from the standard particle emitters that are in After Effects. So let's look at how we can control it ourselves. The 3 main particle emitters are Particle Systems 2, Particle World, and Particle Playground. My favorite one is Particle Systems 2, and that's what we're going to be using today mainly. So make sure that you are back at the playhead is back at the beginning of time, and grab Particle Systems 2 and throw it onto your solid. It may look like nothing is happening, but you can see we have added particle systems. If we click the E button, you can see there has been an effect added to this. The reason you can't see it is because it's not moving. Hit the space bar, and you will see that particles have been created. So let's kind of look at what is happening here in effect control. The birth rate, that is how many of these are being created. So I'm going to let this play, and I'm going to change the birth rate. So, you know, if a bunch of babies are being born, the hospital is going to be just overrun. So that is a birth rate of 58.8 as opposed to 4. Let's go down to a birth rate of, say, 1. There's a lot less babies being born. So I'm going to put it back to where it starts, which is about 4. And now let's look at the next one, which is longevity. So longevity is how long things are going to last. So if I down that down to, say, 0.5, you can see they die off before they even kind of get outside of the sparkle. If we go up, the farthest it can go is 4. So if we go up to 4, Do you see that they're living for a lot longer? Some of them are living all the way down to the bottom of the sparkle. So that is what the longevity and the birth rate do. Now let's go to producer. The producer is where this is coming from. So we have the position of the producer. That is that little spot. If you click right here, we can have it produce from over here, or you can move it with these little things. So if you needed it to kind of go from the middle of the screen or the bottom of the screen, let's kind of put this at the bottom of the screen. So that's what the position does. Now, how big is that little spot? You can see that they're just kind of coming out of a little tiny spot in the middle. It's only 3 pixels wide. X is, of course, left to right. Y is up and down. So if I go ahead and make that producer longer in the X, do you see that now that they are coming from all over the X? Same thing with Y. If I say I don't want it to just come from 3 pixels of Y, I want it to come from the whole screen. So that is how big in both X and Y this producer is. And that actually is a pretty good little effect right there. That's the producer. I'm going to reset because the next, I think the most important one is physics. So we're going back to science class. Let's kind of think about this. I'll come back to animation. Velocity is kind of the speed, but really it has more to do with how it's exploding. The faster it explodes out. So this is a 4. Let me reset it back to what it was. So it's not how fast they're coming out, it's how explosively they are coming out from that center. Gravity is the most important one. Yeah, right now we just have one gravity, which is what all, one Earth gravity. If I have more of that, let me click, and do you see that it is really pulling it down? I'm now at 3 Earth gravities. It's really, really pulling it down. If I go the opposite way to minus, there is no gravity, and so it's all floating up. So gravity is a really, really big deal. Now that I have gravity on, let me go back to producer and kind of move that to the bottom of the screen. Because we have negative gravity, so everything is flying up. This is why I wanted to do that. Let me click on resistance. Resistance, think of resistance as kind of like the atmosphere, or if you had like a bunch of wind resisting you when you were trying to walk. So if you turn up resistance, do you see really high resistance? It's pushing back down on it. It's almost the opposite of gravity. So resistance can help. We've really got a lot of resistance on here. Let me kind of back off on that. I was just doing a lot to show you. Let me put more like, say, 30. So it kind of slowed it down, but it also just kind of pushes back on it. Extra is just like any randomness that you want to put in there. So now let's go back up to this and change the type of animation. We are defaults to be explosive. Let's look at fractal explosive, a little bit different. Twirl, definitely different. Twirly, very similar, but it's like each individual one is twirling as opposed to the entire particle emitter twirling. Vortex. Now, vortex would look better if we didn't have so much resistance. Let me pull the resistance down. That's more what a vortex looks like. So obviously, it would be more of a like a tornado. And once again, I just took the resistance down. Fire to me, so fire is not going to work right now because of gravity. Fire assumes that you have normal gravity. So let me put gravity back. I don't like fire. I don't think it looks like fire. I think it looks more like a tornado. But there you go. Now, direction is how you can change which direction it's coming from. Let me move our position back up so you can see. So you have to have direction turned on before this direction button will work. Okay, so I'm going to put this back on just regular explosive. Oh, I changed my direction. Let me reset the direction. So I'm just going to right click and reset. There we go. The type of particle. This is where it gets really cool. Obviously, we have the birth color and the death color. So what I've got it saying now is when you're born, I want you to be blue, and when you die, I want you to be kind of magenta. And you're not really going to see it on this particular particle. Let's go ahead and change the particle. So up here, instead of line, I'd like it to be star. Ooh. Let's go ahead and make the X radius more. There you go. Oh, look at this. I'm going to change my X and Y radius so that these stars are now just appearing kind of everywhere. And you know, they're kind of going downward. That's because we have our gravity. I'm going to do a minus gravity so they kind of float. Or let's do just a little bit of gravity. I've got 0.1. So they're kind of floating around and not going down to the bottom that much. I think I can start to see that these are dying, the changing of the colors. Let's see if we can change this color even brighter and really see it change. There, I'm definitely seeing the colors change. Let me zoom in. Can you see that as they're dying, they're becoming a different color? Yeah, definitely see the color changing on star. So let's choose the other ones. We have faded sphere, shaded and faded sphere, bubble. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the bubble. Do you see you have birth size and death size? So let's make them start kind of really tiny, and by the time they die, I want them to be really, really big. Can you see the difference now? And we definitely see the color. So they're starting off really small, and they're getting really big. Another thing that would help with this was random seed. That's just how many are just kind of random and different. Can you see the difference with the random seed? I've really cranked that up on this one. I'm going to leave everything the same, and let's look at the other ones. I like these motion polygons and the tri-polygons. It's a lot of fun. So you can see where you can make a lot of really fun backgrounds yourself. You do not have to use the preset backgrounds to create all kind of stuff. So next off, I want us to create some fog or some smoke using this. So I'm going to click on my layer, click E to open up any effects that I have. Then I'm going to grab that effect and hit the delete key to get rid of it. So we're back to our regular solid. Now let's start over again. We're going to create Particle Systems 2. I want to go ahead and take the producer and move it to the bottom of the screen. The first set of numbers is the X coordinates. The second set of numbers are the Y coordinates. So I want to move the Y coordinates down to the bottom of the screen. Or you can click right here and just kind of put it on the bottom of the screen. We now want to go to physics and have minus gravity. I'm going to put mine at about minus 1.5. I'm going to add about 8 resistance, and I'm going to add some random seeds. So it's not quite as perfect. I added to about 200. Now go to particle and change it to faded sphere. We want our birth size to be about 25 and our death size to be about 150. Change your birth color to white and your death color to kind of a smoky gray blue. You see how this could look like water flying out? I actually need to slow this down some. The easiest way to slow this down is to actually slow down the entire layer. So down in the composition area, I'm going to click on the layer, right click and say time. I'm going to time stretch this. So I want this to go a lot slower than it is now. So I'm going to stretch this by 400. It's now going a lot slower. And now that it's going slower, we may want to adjust some of these other factors. But the main thing that we need to do is we need to blur all of this. So I'm going to go over to my effects and presets and type in blur and grab Gaussian blur and throw that on this effect. Then I'm going to blur the heck out of this thing. And we have a not too bad looking kind of smoky thing going there. I have my blur to about 68. Now you can go back and change. We might want to change the depth size, change how much velocity we have. Oh, that's a lot thicker. I downed my velocity to about 6, and I've got a lot thicker kind of smoke coming out. And remember, we can change the direction this is going from. That's a pretty good smoke that we created from nothing. So I am on explosive. I'll kind of open this up to see if you want to look at what I have. And I'm not saying mine are perfect. Mess with it. See what you can think. So that is the basic idea behind particle systems too. I have made a new composition. I wanted to really quickly show you Particle World. Particle World is very similar. If I hit play, there it is. So, but you can see where the floor is, and you could even change that. The cool one thing that is about this, it is very similar. It has a producer and the physics and the particles that you can change. What I like about this one is in physics, you can go to floor and have it bounce off of the floor, or have ice or glue or any of these things. So let me show you what happens with bounce. I'm going to go ahead and have it start. And when I click bounce, you can see that it's bouncing off the floor. So without doing hardly anything, it already looks like something that you would see, say, in a welding shop. So now that you understand particles a little bit better, if you want to try something a little bit more sophisticated, let's try and do some keyframing. I'm going to open this up to the birth rate. And let's get back to the beginning. I'm going to turn on keyframing, and I want to start the birth rate at 0. So nothing's happening when we first open this up. Then after about a second, let's go up to about 3.4. So we've got nothing, and then the birth rate starts. Then I want it to kind of spark for a few minutes, and then I want it to go away. So I'm going to make another keyframe. For the first keyframe, it's at 0. For this one, it's at 3.4. Then it's going to stay at 3.4 until it gets to this keyframe. Then we'll go a little bit more in time, and we're going to go back down to 0. Okay, and of course you can change this to star. That looks pretty good. Or any of these other type of particles that we had in the other one. So it's very similar. Particle World and Particle Systems 2 are my favorites. Play around with it. You can make gobs of stuff, lots and lots of backgrounds. So here's a background I made just with Particle Systems 2 and the bubbles. You, of course, could add a blur to that, and it would be a really cool background. Let me add Gaussian blur. So you can see how you can really make all kind of things, play around with it. Particle systems are a lot of fun.